there are many very practical and very life-changing insights to be gained from philosophy, which the word philosophy means love of wisdom. And we'll talk about some of those insights later on in this video. But really, what the overarching general insight that I could not help but have over the years that philosophy has shown me, and that contrary to what everyone else is saying, really seems to be true, which is that we do live in the good old days. Really. Even though everyone is constantly thinking that they're observing the falling apart of the world and the next generation is worse than theirs and all that. When you study philosophy, when you read the ancients, you see everyone's been saying the same thing then too, and before that. The people who we now call ancients, there are instances of them quoting who to them were ancients, saying the same things, giving the same solutions. And since human nature hasn't changed then or now, and won't for quite some time, it's really sometimes silly to say that we now live on the cusp of something, that we now are observing the world falling apart, and that the good old days are behind us. When really we have to realize that we now, for the first time in human history, live in a world, at least in certain places, where we can think, believe, and even say almost anything that we want. We can believe anything that we want, but we can almost also say everything that we want. That has never, ever been the case anywhere in the world to this degree. Until very recently, having any kind of scientific views would get you in trouble with, for example, in the West, with the church. We all know what a big deal it was for someone to say that the earth actually revolves around the sun and not the sun around the world. But those same people who would condemn someone like that to death were the same people who also condemned to death people who were very religious, who were within the same church, but who interpreted some part of the Bible somewhat differently. So neither for the religious mind nor the scientific mind was there ever freedom to the degree that we enjoy now. Even slight deviations up until very recently were punishable, and they were punishable by death. Literacy, to come to these views in the first place, whether you would be punished for them or not, which are some of the greatest, most beautiful insights we can have as humans, would come from books that, again, until relatively recently, were not only extremely expensive, but a lot of them had to be hand copied. Books were some of the most expensive items anyone could ever buy. And to have a shelf like I do of books behind me is pretty much within anyone's reach nowadays. Just 500 years ago, this would have been the most expensive things that would have to be put in safes and be guarded because of the value, and not only value, but rarity. To be able to consume these ideas, to read them, to engage with them, and then to speak with others about them, and to believe in them, and to shape your life according to them. These are massive privileges that we don't even think about anymore. But it's the first time in human history, and it's constantly advancing too, at least so far. If anything, our problem today, even though we have this freedom now, we create our own divisions. We say the scientific mind is against the religious mind, and the religious mind is against the scientific mind. When in reality, I have to say that especially those who are so scientific minded, who dismiss everything that cannot be proven by data, it's occurred to me, reading about philosophy, reading history, that religion is anthropology, and anthropology is science. So those who dismiss religion dismiss science. And what do we have left then? And vice versa too. The scientific knowledge of the world, of the universe, can only enhance our knowledge and appreciation of God, of the all, of creation, the act of creation, how everything comes about, how everything dies, how everything lives. This can only enhance our faith. So this is a false division. And also another realization is that religion has also a lot of philosophy in it. The love of wisdom. And I will demonstrate that to you. I will show you that this is true. Let's take, we can go anywhere to any religion and take any part of it to show this. Let's go to Christianity. Let's go to the 10 Commandments. Let's take the first commandment. Thou shalt not have any gods before me. That's what the first commandment says. I am your Lord. Thou shalt not have any gods before me or other than me. Essentially, this is a commandment against idolatry, to let go of idols, which, again, anthropologically, historically, was a big issue. Most people on earth believed in multiple gods. They believed in certain objects in the physical world being their God. And it was to stop this worshiping of objects, of other humans, in order to bring about peace. And again, that's the historical background to that. But we still, to this day, as much as in any other time, are worshipers of idols. Who of us has not become desirous of some object or money or recognition or popularity or anything else at all, and has lied, has deceived, has done some act of injustice or some act that goes against kindness in order to possess those objects that we desired. And those have been, and for many people are, every day of their lives, their idols. It's very difficult to make large amounts of money, morally and ethically. So every time we consent to letting a part of ourselves go, which is really the part, our honesty, our kindness, our friendship, our love, these are the things that if someone loves us truly, they love us for these things. So every time we do an injustice, every time we lie, every time we cheat, every time we deceive in order to get money, even if this is for the best interest in terms of living standards for our family, for our friends, for ourselves, we let go of the very part that is lovable about us. We let go of the very part that is worthy of any kind of love about us. And in that way, we engage in idol worship. And this is exactly what philosophy also advises us not to do. That we will never have peace, that we will always have anger, that we will be consumed by competition, that we will lose our way, that we will become what we hate, and that the ends don't justify the means. This is what philosophy tells us. And in a way, it's also what science tells us. There's no honest and proper psychologist in the world who would advise to do whatever it takes to get the physical possessions, the money, the living standards that we want, no matter whom we have to hurt and no matter how much we have to lie. So psychology, science tells us that this is harmful for our being. This is harmful for our health, our mental health, our physical health. And do you see how both religion as well as science as well as philosophy is contained or expressed in just the first commandment of the 10 commandments of just one of the religions that is available to us? All you have to do to come to this understanding in a philosophical, in a love of wisdom way, or in a scientific way also, is to replace the word God with the universe. So when God says, when the universe says, thou shalt not have any other universes, any other alls, any other realities before me, this is what that first commandment means. It means you're giving up the all, you're giving up the universe for some little small ephemeral part of it. And that's an idol. To forego the grandest, highest good for one of its little physical, ephemeral, feeble instances is idolatry. And it's destructive. And it's harmful. And also when we do things to satisfy the dreams and desires and fantasies that we've built up essentially as a child. I mean, I said this before, so many of our dreams are fantasies of how our adulthood should look, what house we should live in, what car we should drive, who we should be with, what kind of family we should have, what kind of friends we should have, what kind of standing in society we should have. All those fantasies that we have about our adulthood that we're now trying to live, we created and came up with in our teenage years. And maybe we updated it once or twice at the age of 20 or something. And now we spend the rest of our lives trying to realize the fantasies of a child. And this too is idolatry. To worship those fantasies and desires that we as a child had. And again, philosophy tells us, science tells us, that this is not going to lead to happiness. And behind those fantasies and desires are again identities that are hidden from our view, because an identity cannot function if you are aware of it. If you have made it your identity to be successful, so-called successful, in your career, then everything that threatens your so-called success in that career will threaten you because you've become one with it. And everything that can threaten your career is not in your control. It's a recipe for disaster to hold yourself responsible for things that are not in your control. Your health, you can eat as healthy as you want, you can exercise as much as you want. Your health is not really in your control. The economy is not really in your control. Other people's actions that might help or not help your career advancement are not in your control. However, because you've identified with the result of your mission, you have made all those things that you're neither in control of nor truly responsible for your identity. You become one with them. And when we become one with our identity, everything that can harm that identity, that is a threat to it, becomes a threat and harmful to us. And ego, the dissolving of the self, the annihilation of the self, is both a theme in psychology, as well as in Christianity, as well as in Islam, as well as in Buddhism, as well as in many of the Hellenistic ancient philosophical schools. Stoicism is nothing other than the annihilation of the self. It's nothing other than seeing what we are in control of and what we are not in control of, and to see that all we're really in control of are our own beliefs and opinions and thoughts, and that we have no control in the external world. And since we are only in control of our own beliefs and opinions, which is all we need for happiness, I can demonstrate to you how even external circumstances of which we are not in control of can be turned around into advantages once they enter into us. Once we stop trying to control them in the outside world and we start controlling them in the inside, in the interior world, that's when we can turn external disadvantages into internal advantages. And I can immediately, intuitively show you that. When we are wrapped up in identity, when we're consumed in identity, and again, anything that threatens that identity threatens us, anything that insults that identity insults us, can be easily seen whenever we hear someone criticizing us, whether to our face or we hear it indirectly from someone else. As soon as we hear that someone thinks that we are a bad such and such, whatever our identity is, right? A bad friend, a bad son, a bad daughter, a bad parent, a bad worker, a bad musician, something that we think we're skilled at and really good at. When someone criticizes that, we feel offended. That very feeling of being offended brings with it anger, resentment, frustration, sort of the need for revenge to get back at someone. All these feelings and emotions which control our life, which are literally the opposite of happiness. When we say happiness, we imagine the absence of all these things in our lives. Is that not so? So they're literally the opposite of happiness, which is what happens to us every time someone says anything negative, so-called negative, about us. But we only perceive things as negative or as positive depending on how they affect our identities. Those identities that run us, within us, they look at everything that happens in the external world as good or bad. They say, how does this relate to me? What does this do to me? Is this good for me? Is this bad for me? And that's why we get offended when those identities that are underlying in our subconscious, our ego, when they get offended and we think we are them, we get offended. We experience the opposite of happiness. And we're doomed to a life of that if we let anyone and everyone say and do things that offend us. And of course, we can't stop them from saying and doing these things. But once we let go of those identities, not only those particular words, instances of offenses cannot hurt us, no offense of any such kind can occur ever again. So train yourself take that disadvantage, so seeming disadvantage of someone criticizing you, and turn it around as an advantage. And here's how to do that. Whenever we hear criticism and we feel that offense, it's an undeniable red flag sign that there's some kind of identity within us that is being offended. If there's anger, if there's resentment, there is identity. Now, depending on what they said, if they, for example, called us a bad parent, we know that we have some sort of identity of trying to be a good parent and to show that to the world and to prove it to ourselves. That's what identity does. It needs to be proven. And someone denying that is our enemy. So this is a great indication that this is going on. And like I said, identity lies in the unconscious. We are not aware of it. If we would become aware of it, it would dissolve. It cannot live in the light. It can only live in the shadow and darkness, in the unknown. So this person criticizing us is actually doing us a huge favor and a big, big service by pointing out where our flaws are, where our faults are, where we can be improved, what stands in between us and happiness. Anyone who criticizes us is showing us what stands between us and happiness if we get offended at what they're saying. So take that information, look where it's pointing at, eradicate that self, that identity, that ego, let go of it, and you can never be offended again. In that way, our enemy is like our friend. What better friend than the person who comes to us and shows us where we can be improved, how we can be improved, and how we can permanently get rid of something that we were unaware for maybe all our lives. It almost makes you want to go to that person and give them a kiss. That's what a friend should do, yet we call them enemies. So what a great advantage, what a beautiful thing they've done to us, for us. They tried to hurt our feelings, they tried to offend us, they tried to hold us back, but we took that and we made ourselves better. There's a quote, I don't remember who it is now, who said, "I step on my problems and I stand taller." And that's exactly what we do when someone criticizes us and we take the time and the effort and the attention to see what that's hitting, what that's striking, what identity there is, what part of our ego is unbeknownst to us being offended and running our lives. And we take that as a signpost to see where that lies and we eradicate that part so that it can never ever happen again. What's better than that? Whoever did that for us should be thanked. And thereby we took a disadvantage and we turned it into an advantage. Truly, it is all one. Everything that we dismiss, we miss out on. There is science, philosophy, wisdom, understanding, and happiness in every major thought, in every thought that looks for truth. And when we dismiss so much of religion, we dismiss not only science, but a part of ourselves and our happiness. And so much of human wisdom, so many human insights that have been recorded in that way. Remember, it's just a medium. Books, philosophy itself, religion itself, science itself is only a medium to communicate universal and timeless truths. And many people here on the channel who say, everything you're saying is Islam. Everything you're saying is Christianity. Everything you're saying is Stoicism. And that's because that's the tradition of thought, that where they come from. They recognize themselves. They recognize their own thoughts in timeless and universal truths. But that doesn't mean the tradition that they come from invented it. But of course, it's a major service that that tradition of thought did for them, to bring them to these timeless and universal truths. And now the only thing that we need to do is to realize that these timeless and universal truths are not exclusive to the places where we found them, that others have access to them too, and that there are as many paths to truth, to timeless and universal truths, as there are people. And to dismiss someone because they've come to this happiness via religion or via science or philosophy is to dismiss the other paths that lead to the same fellowship. This fellowship that we have, that we wish for everyone to have, the highest good that we've discovered in whatever religion or science or school of thought, philosophy we come from, we share it with so many people and we don't even realize it. So we must stop having idols. We must stop having borders in that way in our minds. We must stop having these divisions that are artificial and self-imposed. And we must join this fellowship that we are already in, but we cannot participate in it if we don't realize this. So truly, thou shalt not have any gods before the universal and timeless truths that we all share.